Hello, Remote Work Europe. This is one of our first webinars for 2025, and it's also our very first live session with our Sweden community, Remote Work Sweden. And it's wonderful to introduce you to Luca, who leads that community for us. And he's looking forward to unpacking some of the questions that have already been sent in response to the email and promotion of this event. But we'd also love to have any questions and comments that you want to raise during the discussion. If anything we say you'd like to know more about, if there's any burning questions about remote work in Sweden that you would like to get answered here today, then just pop them in the comments. We will get to them all before the end of this session. And in the meantime, Luca, thanks so much for being with us today. Please tell us a bit more about Remote Work Sweden and the community you've been building for us there.
Thank you very much, Maya. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and with our listeners. And it's the first live event in our Remote Work Sweden group. So it's a great opportunity to introduce ourselves to everybody. I'm very much pleased to be the community leader of this group, which in just a few months, we reached almost, it's more than 3,000 members. So it's quite a huge number, and this rapid growth really reflects the increasing demand for remote work resources and community support in Sweden. And we started with a very small initiative, which has evolved into a vibrant hub where freelancers, entrepreneurs, and remote employees share insights, they collaborate and build connections. And our focus remains on fostering meaningful connections, discussions, providing valuable resources, and creating opportunities for professional development within Sweden remote work ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's going to be increasingly useful resource as the remote work story continues to grow and as it becomes more and more important way of working for all of us wherever we're located. And what do you see as the future vision? How can we continue to grow the remote work community in Sweden, and how can Remote Work Europe support that?
Well, Maya, looking ahead, our goal is to deepen engagement within the group by hosting more live events like this one, and webinars and networking opportunities, both online and offline. We really see the importance in Sweden into networking, and we'll speak about it in a while too. And also, we see also a really increased interest in networking also in real life. And we will do that too. We're also exploring partnerships with the local co-working spaces and organizations to expand our reach. And additionally, we aim to provide the tailored content that addresses the unique challenges and opportunities of remote work in Sweden, such as navigating taxis or leveraging regional tech hubs like Stockholm, Malmö, and Gothenburg. And ultimately, we want Remote Work Sweden to be the go-to resource for anyone working remotely in the country. Now, before we dig into our topics, I'd like to highlight that our group primarily uses English as the main language. And this is because we aim to connect our members with job opportunities across Europe, as we are part of the great Remote Work Europe community. However, we fully understand that some members may prefer communicating in Swedish, and we know that there are a lot of groups related to job searching in Swedish, and that's perfectly fine. If you would like to post or ask questions in Swedish, just feel free to do so. And during this live event, I'll be happy to translate any Swedish posts or questions into English for Maya and other members. Our goal is really to make everyone feel welcome and included, no matter which language they choose to also.
That's amazing, Luca, because it's not something I can help with. And of course, we know that a great many remote work opportunities do depend on English as the international language of the internet. You can't blame the English. It's actually the Americans who got there first and started building out the infrastructure and the defaults. So we do post a lot of content in English, but remember that thanks to the technology, a lot of it developed by remote workers, you can translate anything in your browser, whether it's the articles we're publishing, whether it's the social media posts and so on. So don't let language be a barrier to engaging with this community and to networking. And that's something I'd like to talk about next, Luca, is how people network in Sweden, because it's a huge country. I've never been there, so this is opening eyes for me, but I know that it's a country that embraces big cities, very rural areas, lots of differences in between. How do people network both on and offline in Sweden? What's the culture like there?
Well, Maya, first of all, the potential here in networking is really huge. I mean, both the infrastructure and the people working in, especially in the tech, it's a really huge tech hub in Sweden, you know. But not only that, we have also really lots of consultants, recruiters also working remotely, professional creatives. The social media influencer hub is great. I mean, I see, and also in our group, we have really great social media influencers, you know, in Sweden. So the potential in networking is really huge, and it's something that we want to focus on. Now, there are quite a lot of people, you know, engaged into making events, and those events are really great. You know, they're really amazing, really great presentations. You know. And they give also possibility to people to network also after that or during it, you know. But the problem that we see actually here in remote work Sweden is that it's missing some kind of constant possibility to network, especially in real life for people, you know. And we all know that here in Sweden, you know, the weather is not like the best weather in the world, you know, especially in the winter, you know. And there are not so many other opportunities to meet, like for example, in Spain. When you're in Spain, you know, you are in a cafe and you meet people, you know, it is quite different, you know, with that. So we really need the opportunities come into, you know, help for people to network and connect with each other. And that's where we at Remote Work Sweden really are working with, you know. So we will connect with co-working spaces. We will do live events, both online and offline. We understand also the importance to in doing online events like this one, for example, so that also our fellow members working, for example, from other countries, but who are related to Sweden in some way, can also follow us. We have also a number of people who would like to move to Sweden and work remotely from Sweden. So everybody will have possibility to connect with us and follow us in our webinars and events.
That's brilliant. And maybe we can bridge the gap online between the face-to-face events, particularly through the long dark winters that I know that you're coming out of now. Hopefully the sun is returning and you're going into those glorious long summer nights. That's when we envy you in the Mediterranean, those beautiful sunsets that you have up there. So how would you like to encourage people then to participate more in the group? What could people do? Because we're putting this content out there, but we need you to tell us what you want people, but what can people do to get more involved?
Well, Maya, it's some points are really important, you know, to be engaged in this group. And first of all, share your expertise. I mean, really, you can post articles, tips, or experiences related to remote work. You can ask questions. You can spark discussions about challenges that you're facing, which might help also someone else too. Engage with others, so you can comment on posts, offer advice, or introduce yourself to new members. And this is quite an important point, which I really would like to focus to. Just introduce yourself. Now you have the possibilities, these possibilities in the group actually to make some posts about yourself and introduce you what you're working with. Probably in the future, you know, the potential of this group is quite high. We're aiming to quite a really higher number of people, you know, which will be engaged in this group, because we're also covering the entire Sweden, which is quite a big country, you know. But right now, you know, you really have the possibility to introduce yourself and be out there if you want to talk about what you're working with, and just tell us, you know, your struggles or your challenges, you know, along the way. And also another thing is when we'll be hosting events also, we really would like to you to lead also discussion or a workshop during those events. So by contributing, we think the members not only enrich the group, but also strengthen their own networks and visibility within the community.
100%. And, it really is your network. So please use it. And I would only like to add to that it's not just the Facebook group. You are part of Remote Work Europe. So we can definitely, if you're doing something interesting, if you're recruiting, if you're looking for work, we have a daily stream, which is updated from EU Remote Jobs, of employed opportunities that are open to people who are resident in Sweden to apply for. We also have all the great articles that Luca and I have been creating about different aspects of remote working in Sweden, aspects of culture, networking opportunities, language, all sorts of really interesting articles that we've been creating at Remote Work Sweden. And we'd like to invite you. We have an entrepreneur series. If you have an interesting story about your own journey as a remote worker in Sweden, then maybe we could write about you for the website. Let's profile you there. If you're hiring, we'd be glad to include your vacancy in our weekly newsletter, and do make sure you're signed up for our newsletter wherever you're listening from. Because we have remote jobs going out every week there, people who are actively recruiting. But if you're recruiting, let's get your vacancies in there, and let's support more and more people to find real remote work in Sweden or from anywhere, because it gives you that mobility. Now, we've had a couple of questions coming in. Carmen, the daily stream, you will find that on the link that's on the screen there, Remote Work Sweden. So do come along and bookmark that. And also do make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter. I'll just drop the newsletter sign up link there, because that is where we actually email out jobs every week. And it's not automated, it's curated lovingly by a real human who goes through and checks that all the jobs are real, that they're all definitely open to people in Europe. And she tags them with the country flags so that you know exactly what you're applying for. But make sure that you check out all of our website. We've got lots of content on there. Now, I've got some questions that were sent in already, actually. One of them was about, and I just wanted to clarify this because I think I know the answer, but there is no digital nomad visa as such for Sweden. Is that correct, Luca?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's correct, Maya. There is not. But there are talks which are going on, in the parliament, which probably will allow, people to get into the country with a digital nomad visa, and that would be great news. So, let's stay connected, and we will, of course, also post about it, in the group. We will give all the news related to it. We have some. Really nice programs here, especially in the city of Malmö, which allows people to come and work here from Malmö, some kind of residency program, but that's not a digital nomad visa, but we will try also to get some connections and partnerships with those programs that are present right now.
Yeah, maybe we can try and make some representation to these discussions going on about digital nomad visas. I think, it's a fairly new phenomenon. They reckon about half the countries in the world now have some kind of remote work or digital nomad visa, but that means half the countries in the world are sitting back and just waiting to see how that rolls out. And there have been legal challenges and issues with implementation. So I think these things take their time. In the meanwhile, then, if you want to come to Sweden to be a remote worker, as I understand it, you either have to be allowed to live and work in Sweden anyway, which means EU or EAA passport, or you need to be sponsored by an employer who is based in Sweden. Is that correct, as you understand it? That they give you a work visa?
Well, we have this 3 months rule, Maya, here in Sweden, and then you have to distinguish between EU residents and non-EU residents. within those 3 months, any people coming from the EU can stay without sending any paper, to the authorities, and they can work and be here in Sweden. After that, the difference is between EU residents and non-EU residents, where EU residents just have to ask for a kind of residence number, we can say. It's called the personnummer, and they will ask it to the tax agency, which is called Skatteverket. And as long as they have a work, and they have possibility, and they can prove that they can stay in Sweden, so they can stay in Sweden without any problem, while people coming from a non-EU country, they will have to ask also to another authority, which is called the Migrationsverket, so the migration agency, and they will have to ask for a residence permit.
Okay, so it's doable, even for those of us who do not have EU passports. Not that we're envious or anything. So it's good to know that we might still be able to get a chance.
But I would like to point out, Maya, that we know that there will be a lot of questions related to taxes, migration policies in Sweden, because we know that we would like to help also many people getting rid of this struggle in working for Sweden, So in the future, we will have some partnership with some tax advisor, and people experts in this topic. Of course, I can help our members right now with any questions that you have. So feel free to ask any questions related to taxes and migration. But of course, I'm not the best expert in the world right here, so we will find somebody who can really help you, and who can really connect with you and can answer all of the questions.
That's brilliant, because as some people might have noticed, Luca is an immigrant to Sweden, not a native. So you've been through that process of having to do the paperwork, register for your residency, find the right professional support. And that is definitely, we want to bring you partnerships with people who are legally qualified to help support you with all of those different aspects that you have to figure out whenever you arrive anywhere new. And it is always a challenge. But if you're determined to get to Sweden, then let's talk about who is working remotely in Sweden. What industries are embracing remote work? What's the culture like there for hiring?
Well, as we already mentioned, Maya, the IT and tech industry is really huge in Sweden. I think mostly it's the infrastructure, which is really amazing. There's high-speed internet and really great digital infrastructure in Sweden, which makes it seamless working remotely. You can really work remotely from, especially in the major cities, you can really work remotely from almost anywhere. And now over 70% of Swedish companies offer flexible work options. So the tech sector is designing business models from the ground up with the remote work in mind, relying heavily on the cloud-based software and tools for real-time collaboration.
That's what about the rest of us, though? If we're not tech professionals, are there opportunities for other kinds of expertise within those industries?
Of course, Maya. It's really growing, month after month with the remote work opportunities, And we have, for example, the creative industries like designers, writers, copywriters, and marketers. They often thrive in remote work settings, professional services, consultants, recruiters, accountants, legal professionals. They're also leveraging remote tools to serve clients effectively, And also, if we talk about e-commerce, we know with the rise of online business, many roles in logistics, marketing, and customer support can be done remotely, and that's really growing in Sweden too. So even manufacturing and retail, they are starting to explore remote work options where possible, and also administrative tasks or supply chain management. So there are really lots of opportunities.
That's really good to hear, because one of the things that we get a lot of people writing into us about is like, how can I work remotely? Because I'm not a developer, I'm not a technical person. My professional experience is in one of these other verticals within business. So it's really good to hear that those shifts are happening within Sweden. So are more people wanting to adopt remote work then? How is that reflecting in the way that we go about our life and work in Sweden?
Yeah, of course. Right now, we can say that 46% of jobs advertised in Sweden, they offer either hybrid or fully remote working options.
Wow.
It has been a 30% increase in the number of Swedes working remotely at least part of the time over the past 5 years. Now it's a bit complicated to distinguish people working hybrid or working fully remote in statistics, but we know that the numbers will just grow and grow, during the next months. And Sweden is really pushing also industries into more flexible options. Right now we have a lot of offices, on site, which has been built for some years ago, and they were hosting almost all the workers, all the employees in the company, But things are changing, and every new company is structuring themselves in a way that it's more focused on remote work.
That's brilliant. So this is exciting news for job seekers then in Sweden.
Yeah, it is. It is actually. We still have some challenges, especially now into this economy, which is not going great in the world. During the pandemic, almost 100% of the workforce were working remotely. It was a really great opportunity for us to test how we could work remotely, and everything was going great. So it was really a nice test, for us here in Sweden to see how things could work. Then, after the pandemic, people came back to offices, and I would like also to point out that working remotely is not equal also working from home. It means that working from home is a possibility, but the social aspect into remote work is a great thing, because you can really meet people, you can really participate into events and connect with the people from other sectors too, which you can't when you're working on site, like 9 to 5 in an office, and we want to prove that we at Remote for Sweden, in the future, that's a really great opportunity for all the people who like to work remotely into connecting with others.
Definitely. It sounds like some really exciting shifts going on in Sweden. We've got some questions coming through which relate to sort of immigration and compliance and so on. But before we go to those, I'd just like to try and understand better how this is being reflected demographically in Sweden. Are there different trends in different areas or different life stages? Where is remote work really growing?
Well, the major cities, like the three major cities in Sweden, so Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmo, they have the huge numbers related to remote work. It's a very high percentage of people working remotely, but people from the rural areas too, where they didn't have any possibilities before, to work in some kind of remote work, option. They are now experimenting, also the advantage also of living outside the big cities, but having anyway possibilities to connect with people into big cities, And maybe sometimes you can, even if you work hybrid, even if you want to push companies in working maybe less and less also hybrid, but more remotely, and giving people to connect in another way, in big cities, where you want to be participating maybe into events, connect also with other people, but it's still growing, and people are also finding possibilities also to live into maybe, for example, in the countryside, where it's calmer and sometimes it's even cheaper, more affordable living there, It's an amazing landscape. Here in Sweden, we have a really great nature, forest. It's really nice also being a countryside here, So many people are also experimenting that.
Yeah, well, that's what remote work freedom gives you, isn't it? We'd love to see some photos of where you're working from remotely in Sweden. Pop them in the Facebook group and inspire us with the beautiful landscapes. And I know the wonderful sunsets and sunrises you get over the nature there. But coming down to earth from the sunshine, then let's talk about law and compliance. Do remote workers have anything particular to bear in mind in terms of the employment law in Sweden?
Well, yeah, because you have to be careful when you're working remotely from Sweden, for example, for a foreign company. And remote work, it gives opportunities to look and search for job, in all Europe, in all the world, So this doesn't mean that you are not complying with laws in Sweden when you're working remotely from Sweden, especially when you're a resident in Sweden, because there are also, for example, social securities taxes, and the thing is, if you're working for a foreign employer, after a while, maybe this employer will be forced to sign up also for social securities insurance in Sweden.
Yeah, because that's where you're living. Then that's where you should be supporting the local social safety net, I suppose. We have a question from Mataza about the job seeker visa. Would it be right that in this case he would need to be working for a Swedish company to fulfill the obligations of that visa, or is that something to take professional advice about, do you think?
Yeah, of course, it would be best to work for a Swedish company, Now, hello, Murtaza. It's nice to see your question here. Just let us know also more details. For example, if you're looking for a job for a Swedish company or for other companies, if you would like to work remotely from Sweden or outside Sweden, but for a Swedish company, for example, because there are really different rules. And the main thing is that you pay taxes in the country of residence. But if you're working for another company, for a foreign company, then sometimes you're paying taxes also. For example, if you're working for an Estonian company, then you pay taxes maybe in Estonia too, but you can get those taxes back in Sweden. So you really have to be careful with taxes, and there are really lots of implications in it. Okay, so you're looking for a job in Sweden. Well, that's great, and we really hope that we can support you also in finding it as soon as possible, And well, as we said, you're looking for a job in Sweden, and I assume you also would like to move to Sweden, So that's the thing, as we said, you really need to apply for at least a migrations market, after some months that you've been here. But having a job in Sweden, it really gives you opportunity, possibility also to establish yourself in Sweden.
Yeah. And in terms of supporting you to find that work, then do make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter. Do engage with the Facebook group. Come along, and I think it would be fine to make a post about the kind of work you're looking for. You might catch the eye of an employer. If we get too many posts of people looking for work, we'll have to gather those folks up into a thread somewhere. But I think anybody who's looking for work right now that you can do from Sweden, particularly affects access to visas and so on, then come along and make a post. But imagine your dream employer was reading that post and really tell us what you have to offer, what you're bringing to the table. Because if you just need a job or whatever, then that's not going to get you anywhere. But tell us about your experience. Tell us about what value you would bring to your perfect remote employer, and let's see if we can amplify that. You can also engage with us on LinkedIn as well. We have strong presence there, and that's where the recruiters and the businesses are hanging out. So it's really important to come and catch their eye. Now, I'd like to move on to, we've talked a little bit about taxes and employment in Sweden. What about cross-border taxes? And I know this is where it gets complicated, and we're not going to be trying to answer questions which are better for a tax professional, but Luca can point you at professional advice if that's needed. But in general, how are remote workers taxed in Sweden?
Well, it always depends on what we talked about, Maya. It's where you are, which is your country of residence, and that's where you're paying taxes. And so it's really important to really be careful also when you're working for a company which is located outside of Sweden, especially. Because as we said, there are social security taxes, for example, involved, or on the opposite, if you are a Swedish person working, for example, from Spain, Greece, Italy, Thailand, for example, for a Swedish company, then you have really also be careful also with taxes, as far as I know, within 5 years, you are still responsible in contacting the Swedish authorities and make sure and inform them that you are not living in Sweden. Because you can be still, eligible for paying taxes in Sweden, actually, And after these 5 years are gone, then it will be the Swedish authorities who have these responsibilities, So there are quite a lot of implications, but we really hope to have a tax advisor on board as soon as possible, so that people can ask also very detailed questions related to each country.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's still, the tax and regulation all around the world has not caught up with the way that we want to live and work in 2025. It's always the last thing to change. I mean, we still can't even tax the big international corporations properly globally. They're still claiming tax residency in Ireland at 10% or something like that. So it's going to be a long time before the regulatory framework becomes at all unified. In the meantime, it's fragmented and we just have to muddle through it. Take the best advice that we can from professionals. Make sure you're taking individual advice, not something that you read on a blog or that you saw in an article somewhere. You generally have to pay for that advice, but then that advice is indemnified and you can depend upon it, so document it accurately, and then you can bring that advice to a tax inspection or wherever if you ultimately have to, because it's complicated at the moment. And we've got a question in from Charlotte actually about working remotely. So I assume, Charlotte, that you're resident in Sweden as a tax resident, you've got a 100% remote job, but they don't want you going off and working somewhere else for longer than 30 days. Now, this, I believe, will be policy that is made at your employer level. And there are lots of good reasons for that policy. And it's precisely the kind of things we were just talking about. Most of the risk falls on the employer. There's risks of permanent establishment. There's risks of breach of employment contract. And basically, employers are still very much evolving their policies. They don't even have a consistent name. They might be called them digital nomad policies or workation policies or work from anywhere policies. And generally speaking, particularly bigger employers, and this is worldwide, this is not a Sweden thing, are erring on the side of caution. So they're saying, you don't get to go and just pick up your laptop and work anywhere. The fact that you theoretically could, because the work permits it, they're still very concerned about the risks for them of liabilities. For example, if you decided to go and work, say you came to Spain with your Swedish 100% remote job, that's great. You might overstay that 30 days, for example, and then suddenly you sign a big contract on behalf of your employer whilst you're actually in Spain. Now, the Spanish government might look at that and say, actually, that is a business decision. So the company is being managed and directed. And Spain might say, you should be registered as a business entity here, and we would like a slice of corporation tax, and we're going to backdate that, and we're going to sanction the company for not registering a business entity in Spain. They might already have a branch in Spain where the employees are on completely different pay scales, or if you decide to take that laptop to Bali or India instead, you might find that there's very different employment arrangements there. So maybe you could contract with the business entity in India, but then you might find that they look at your pay scale and say, well, we can't pay this person from the Nordic pay scales expectations the same as we're paying people in India. So it's complicated and it's a mess. But I would say that is not a general rule in Sweden, but it's a tendency we're seeing worldwide for people to be working on these policies and to be cautious about them. 30 days, that seems harsh if you're an EU resident, that you can actually, theoretically, according to your passport, you can go and spend 90 days anywhere, but you do need to be careful, because your employment contract and the rights that gives you will override your right to residence, in terms of, you can hang out in Spain or on the beach in Malta or something for 90 days, but you might find that you're in breach of your employment contract. So I would keep negotiating with them. They might evolve that policy as time goes on, but as it stands, it's really up to them to set the terms. Is this something that you've come across, Luca, with people wanting? I'm just thinking of those dark winters as well. People want to run away.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and also, we have a remote work, like Charlotte here, remote work means flexibility, and when an employer, tells us that you can work anywhere in Europe for 30 days at max, it doesn't feel quite a lot like remote work anymore, We really want to have this flexibility in working remotely from anywhere in the world, whenever we want, and also for how long we want. Now, I think you covered most of the important topics related to this question, Maya. I also would like to add that many employers are feeling like when you're working outside of Sweden, then you're not covered with the same insurance, especially work insurance, that you have when you're working in Sweden. We have quite a lot of laws in Sweden related to work environment, work insurance, not talking also about taxes, And when you are located outside of Sweden, then everything changes, and you as an employer, you have to cover also those risks also outside of Sweden. And so it depends also on the employer, which kind of insurance they were selling in with other companies, But also, as you mentioned, Maya, we really hope that in the future there will be more flexibilities also in regulations, like you can really have an insurance, for example, which covers you in all of Europe, for example, or cross-border regulations, for example, between Sweden and the UK, for example, or Germany or France, where you don't have to struggle, with all these regulations when you're working from a country or another one. So let's hope for that. But right now, I understand the question from Charlotte, and as you say, my suggestion is also to talk with the employer and see if you can extend it, for example, to 2 or 3 months. I mean, I think 3 months is like everywhere in Europe where you can stay, without any problem at all.
Yeah, these things are very much a moving target. It's well worth negotiating and lobbying within your organization, and also set a good example of trying to really plan these things up front. I came across a great tool actually for assessing the legal risks of compliance. I'll drop that into the Facebook group later so you can have a play with that. It's from Work From Anywhere, who do global compliance, and they're introducing this new tool for assessing the corporate risk of a planned workation. So that's something that we're all going to be finding quite useful, I think. And the other thing I would just say is, you find a lot of this question gets asked a lot in sort of digital nomad groups and communities that you see online, and a lot of people will respond to that by saying, don't tell them, wing it, just go for it and don't say anything. And we tend to be a bit more cautious at Remote Work Europe, and we would not encourage that, simply because there's the chances of things going wrong might be low, but the consequences could be really bad if you suddenly get caught out, and you could literally lose your job because you breached your employment contract. You could find yourself outside of your medical cover that comes with your job. You wouldn't go on holiday without medical insurance or without travel insurance, and yet we find people encouraged to do this when it comes to their job. And yeah, you probably won't get caught, but if you do, if they do an IP sweep and actually they notice that even though your VPN says you're in Sweden, but actually your device MAC address suggests that you're on the other side of the world, that could be a big problem. If something breaks down in that laptop and it's a company asset and you're supposed to just ship it back to Malmo to get it swapped out in 24 hours, and well, hang on, how does that work when I'm on a beach in Bali? if something goes wrong, you're very exposed and you haven't got a leg to stand on. So it's definitely better to try and negotiate that, because it's definitely, it's something that it's complicated, its policy is evolving, and it's political as well. And I think that's something that's affecting everywhere. We know that migration is an issue in the Nordics generally. And there's also that urban-rural divide. How is that playing out, Luca? Do you find that people are more accepting of remote work in cities, or can remote work change the trends in some way there?
Yeah, I think so, Maya. In cities, of course, the infrastructure in cities, especially with a high-speed connection, it's really huge, and it's really well set up in Sweden. So in the countryside, there are some areas in the countryside where this is not evolved, like in major cities. But if we compare Sweden to other countries, even when you are outside major cities, you have like a high-speed connection, and you can work almost from everywhere. And that's a really important point, when working remotely. And as we were talking about also before, in this conversation, some people are quite not interested maybe anymore into moving in major cities like in the past, where prices have gone up quite dramatically during the last years. I don't have the percentage here right now, but it's really alarming. And some people are finding possibilities to work remotely from outside of these cities. In Sweden, we have these three major cities, which are Stockholm, Malmö, and Gothenburg. And around those cities also there are towns which are quite interested working remotely from, and they are much more affordable, than major cities. So there are a lot of opportunities opening up in Sweden too. Let's hope we'll have a more distribution also of people in the country, and not located only around those three main cities in the future.
Yes. Yeah. That's an exact mirror of Spain. It's exactly the same thing. You have cities that are getting more and more overpriced, more and more competitive, drains on resources. And then the rural areas, you have these smaller communities which are really suffering because people in the past moved away because they had to go where the work was. Now you can bring the work back and choose where you live. And that's so powerful. And I feel that the potential for that remains untapped within Europe. This is what I want Remote Work Europe to be a voice for over the coming time, is to really help local areas, towns, villages realize the potential to attract people back with amazing places to live, to raise their families, to engage in nature, to build their personal networks. And they don't have to attract industry and employers to come and settle there as well and change the character of their rural areas. So it's a really exciting potential. And I think that it's something that we can look forward to in all corners of Europe. And it's great to see Sweden leading the way there. So I would say that the future's looking pretty good then, Luca, for remote work in Sweden. Anything else that we should be looking at? Challenges, threats, opportunities? What's the future like for remote work Sweden?
As you mentioned, Maya, there are a lot of opportunities for remote work in Sweden, and it's really looking good. But we still see some struggles into companies and into organizations, for making people more comfortable also with remote work. The majority of companies are adopting this hybrid work, which we really prefer compared to the on-site full-time work as in the past. But we really want companies to be more adaptable also into a fully remote work setup in the future. And especially also giving people opportunity to work where they want from. That's the main point of remote work. So we really want to focus on that for in the next months and years here in Remote Work Sweden. We really want to connect not only job seekers but also freelancers, influencers too. People working into not only the tech sector, as you said, Maya, but also who like to come more and more into the remote work setup. So we are just at the beginning of our journey, I think, and there's a lot of possibilities and really exciting things going on in the future for us.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. It's been really interesting having this discussion today, and thanks particularly to Luca for inspiring this conversation and bringing so much expertise and insight to the table here. But also thank you so much to everybody who's commented and engaged and followed this stream. We really hope that it's been valuable for you, and we hope that it will lead you to come and get involved with Remote Work Sweden. Jump into the Facebook group, come and introduce yourself. If you have questions afterwards, because sometimes when you listen to something like this, there's a lot of information just coming at you and you think, oh, I wish I'd jumped in with this, or on reflection, this is what I still feel I need to clarify. So just come and join us. You can add comments to wherever you're watching this, and Luca and I will do our best to come back. But if we miss anything, or if there's something that you really want to know that we haven't addressed, then please just ask a question in the Facebook group. We're there for you. We want to make sure that we're covering everything off that you're curious about, and that you feel truly part of this movement for the growth of remote work in Sweden and across the rest of Europe. And yeah, maybe we'll even get that workation up to the full 90 days that you should have for your freedom of movement within the EU. And I realized the one thing we didn't really talk about in detail today was freelancing and digital nomading in Europe. But I think we need to come back and do this again, right, Luca? I think we need to do another session really taking a deep dive into self-employment and the different options there. And in the meanwhile, we've covered so much about employment, about trends, about demographics. It's been incredibly insightful. So I think if we've got no more questions, I'm probably going to wrap this up. We've got people thanking us, which is great. We really appreciate that. Come and say hi in the group, everybody who's joined us today. And I think it only remains for me to say thank you very much, Luca, for all that you've done to grow the Remote Work Sweden community, and for all your amazing insight that you've shared with us today.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's really an honor for me to be part of this community and being also part of these amazing members that we have. So let's grow together, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Fantastic. Here's to remote working in Sweden now and in the future.